Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Merlin, Season 2, Episode 4, Lancelot and Guinevere. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of exactly what happens within this episode. So the episode starts with Morgana, Gwen, and a night escort heading out to take a pilgrimage to her father's grave, when they are attacked midway by a group of bandits who then kidnap them. While they are on the journey, Morgana manages to tell the bandit leader that she wants to take a bath, and he and the men, being the perverts that they are, decide that they want to watch and become completely distracted by her removing her clothing to her undergarments. And Gwen takes advantage of their distraction to steal the main guy's sword and throw it to Morgana, who manages to disarm them and slash at them, and then they go to run. However, as they're running away, Guinevere twists her ankle and tells Morgana that obviously she is more important, so she has to keep going. Morgana does so, but leaves the sword for Gwen to defend herself. Obviously, this puts the bandit in a bad situation because he was actually working on behalf of a bigger evil who has a whole bandit encampment who hired them to kidnap Morgana for ransom, and failure would be very bad. So he decides that since his boss, his employer, does not know what Morgana looks like, Gwen can impersonate her and brings her to the encampment as Morgana. Meanwhile, Morgana is found by Arthur and the knights that were sent to look for her and Gwen and bring her back to the castle, where she is greeted happily by Uther. However, Uther is not willing to send out soldiers for a servant. And so Morgana, of course, is very upset by this. Arthur, having started to develop feelings for Guinevere, is also upset that she is gone, so he starts to pack for him and Merlin to go and rescue Gwen. Morgana comes in to basically yell at him for not standing up to Uther. However, then he points out that, if she would shut up, he is packing. And this, of course, then puts her in a better mood, and he and Merlin set out to go and save Gwen. Meanwhile, while they're traveling to where Gwen is, Gwen at the bandit camp finds out that Lancelot is a fighter at this bandit camp who basically fights for his life and a small monetary reward, kind of like a wrestling ring, only for duels with swords. And of course, the losers get eaten by a wildren, which is like a giant naked rat, mole rat type creature. Anywho, he wins his fight. He and Guinevere lock eyes. They share a moment. Then he basically goes to where she is being kept in a cell and promises to rescue her, that he's going to come back that night. They share moments. She reignites his faith and his hope in his future and starts to fall for him. He obviously is already quite fallen for her. And he does end up being able to help her escape from the cell by poisoning the meal of the guards ahead of time. They then start to run. He stays behind to buy her time while she continues running and is then captured and put into the cage. Unfortunately, Guinevere, after they split up, did end up getting recaptured, and so she joins him in the cage and they end up tied back to back. This, of course, is when Arthur and Merlin manage to make it inside, and they start a fight, manage to get into the cage to fight off the wildren, and then The boss also gets into the cage, however, they manage to escape into the tunnels while the Wildren is in the cage with the boss. And once Gwen and Arthur are out of earshot, Merlin then uses magic to close the cage back to keep the rat from returning into the tunnels, and then he and Lancelot catch up to them. Then there's a bit of an awkward jealousy moment where Arthur realizes that Gwen and Lancelot have feelings for each other, reciprocal feelings for each other, and gets a bit jealous. Lancelot notices the jealousy, and rather than considering Gwen's feelings, he decides to consider Arthur's feelings and decides to bow out and leave. And then Arthur, Gwen, and Merlin make their way back to Camelot, where Gwen is reunited with Morgana, and that is our episode. So now that we have been reminded about what happens in the episode, it's time to rank the episode. We rank on two lists, our mostly objective ranking list, which is based on set values, and then the personal ranking list, which is pure opinion. So we begin, as always, with our set values, and I've highlighted those I felt applied to this episode. So first we have, of course, our supporting relationship development, which I feel is the main plot of this episode. We have Gwen and Lancelot being reunited when he comes into fight and she's sitting there for dinner, still believed to be Morgana. They lock eyes and share this very meaningful look. Then, of course, he comes to where she's being kept in a cell, and they of course have their meaningful where he's like, "Oh, the world isn't what I thought it was. I've hit some hard times." And she's like, "You'll always be amazing to me. You're worth everything, blah blah blah. Don't give up hope, don't give up faith. I know how amazing you are." And they're holding hands through like the grill, um like the metal webbing barrier that is on the cell. And then of course at some point, she also comments on how she didn't think that she could feel the way she does about anybody, the way she feels about him. And then he, of course, is willing to die for her as he is helping her escape. They pause, they share a kiss, and then she runs off while he stays behind. Then, of course, she's brought back and they are tied back to back and they hold hands basically while they are back to back. We then also get so basically a lot of development there. We then get our multi-season supporting character developments, which are worth 3 points each. And this, of course, is Morgana and Gwen being kidnapped, then Gwen having to impersonate Morgana, and Lancelot having become a pit fighter. And I'm counting all those three small things together to equal the 3 points. We then have our world building, which is the fact that Wildron exist, which are those creepy giant naked mole rats. And finally, last but not least, another 4 points for the main relationship development, which is, of course, that Arthur admits that he has feelings for Gwen to Merlin, who he is traveling with, but makes him promise to keep it a secret. So on our positive side, that gives us 13. However, there were some negatives in this episode as well. So the first negative is, of course, the negative messaging or behaviors. Obviously, we have kidnapping, we have imprisonment, we have poisoning when Lancelot poisons the guards. So we also have the general distasteful perversion of the bandits wanting to watch Morgana bathe, though that doesn't actualize, it still is something that they were planning. So overall, a lot of negative messaging and behavior, so that's minus 2 points. We then, of course, have our supporting relationship regression, which is that Lancelot, after finding out about Arthur's feelings, decides to bow out and leave, abandoning Gwen without ever taking any moments to actually consider Gwen and Gwen's feelings and what Gwen would want. which is kind of crappy, but obviously because he has left, she's crying, brokenhearted. That is definitely a regression in their relationship. And finally, -3 points for the main relationship regression or breakup, which is Arthur basically, once he and Merlin save Gwen and Lancelot, they hold hands, she smiles at him, and they share a look, and you can see how disappointed Arthur is by this. And then he starts kind of acting with some ugly jealousy, saying, "Oh, I only came to save you because Morgana begged me," and this, that, the other thing. Well, like, and then just like generally being quiet, kind of rude. And even when they meet with Morgana, Gwen smiles at him over Morgana's shoulder, and he's kind of stone-faced. So obviously he has some jealousy issues to work through, and was again disappointed by seeing that Gwen liked Lancelot and was open about that liking. So, with all of those points being considered, this makes it a 6 out of 10 episode for this episode. And so, to remind us of the season 2 standings so far in a mostly objective ranking, in first place was The Once and Future Queen, second, The Curse of Cornelius Sagan, third was The Nightmare Begins, and then this episode came in fourth place so far, Lancelot and Guinevere. Now on to my personal ranking. I have made no secret throughout these reviews that I don't really like Guinevere as Guinevere. If the character was literally anybody else, I think she's a nice person. She would be likable. But as the Guinevere of Legends, I hate the character. I really genuinely do. So this being such a Guinevere heavy episode, wasn't super fond of it. However, that being said, I do like Lancelot and Guinevere as a couple. I think they would make an amazing couple. I love the chemistry between the actress and the actor, which actually exists, unlike between the actor who plays Arthur and Guinevere. So, this being more focused on them as a couple was actually something that I did enjoy. Obviously, we got a lot of Arthur Merlin moments because it was Arthur and Merlin going to save Guinevere, and you had, a few little things like at the start, to sneak out of the castle, Arthur sets Merlin to create a distraction, and he decides to send barrels to barrel down the night guards. And Arthur comes out and is like, "I told you to distract them, not knock them out." And Merlin's like, "There's just never any pleasing you, is there?" And then, of course, Arthur, he starts to describe what a wildren is, looks at Merlin's face, which looks like a deer caught in headlights, and then basically changes it from giant rats to baby rats to basically make Merlin go into these tunnels where they're supposed to live. When they're scaling the wall, Merlin accuses Arthur of showing off because he's able to scale the wall quite easily and Merlin really isn't. Then, of course, Merlin once again is used as the distraction, but he can't use magic this time because Arthur's right there, so he ends up getting pushed into where the guards are and basically has to talk his way out until Arthur shows up to knock them out, which luckily isn't that long. And then, of course, they escape, and Merlin just basically gets to sit there awkwardly while he's kind of observing this triangle that isn't really a triangle at this point because Arthur's feelings are for Gwen. Gwen and Lancelot have mutual feelings, but then Lancelot bows out. And Merlin does go over and talk to Lancelot about it, which is how we find out that he's bowing out, so he doesn't come between Arthur and Guinevere, even though really it's Arthur coming between Guinevere and Lancelot, in my opinion. And honestly, even with the original legends, Guinevere did cheat with Lancelot on Arthur. Like, that's just part of the original legends as well. And I honestly think they probably are more likely the true love story of the legend and the show. And it's very disappointing that they don't end up together because I think they actually would have made a good couple. And I'm not really on board with the Arthur and Guinevere thing in this show at all. So overall, felt like it was a strong, well, honestly, there were good points to it, but those points that I'm describing that are positive are a very, very small part of the episode. Most of the episode is Gwen focused. Even like the Lancelot Gwen things are kind of in between. It's basically Guinevere and the boss of the bandits and the bandit that kidnapped them going through and, talking about how, she's held for ransom. Uther's supposed to love his ward, but isn't paying the ransom for her. Once Morgana leaves, being forced to impersonate her. Yeah, so overall, it had good moments. Strong plot, it did not have, in my opinion, at least to my preferences. So I decided to give it a 4 out of 10 because it wasn't the worst episode there's ever been, but it also wasn't one that I particularly liked because I'm not a fan of the character, and it was very Guinevere focused. So, our season 2 ranking so far in the personal ranking, in first place we had The Nightmare Begins, then The Curse of Cornelius Sagan in second. This episode did come in third, Lancelot and Guinevere, and then in fourth was The Once and Future Queen. Bringing us to the final segment, which is our series ranking so far. And on our mostly objective side, we had season 1 ending with 69.23%. And so far, season 2 has earned 29 points out of a maximum 120 points. Then the personal side, season 1 ended at 66.92%. And season 2 so far has gotten 24 points out of 120. So with that, we've now rewatched and ranked Merlin Season 2, Episode 4, Lancelot and Guinevere. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.